Susanne Scheibe of the Faculty of Behavior and Social Sciences, who's a professor of lifespan development and organizational behavior. And she's going to be speaking about work challenges in times of COVID-19 to support the multi-age workforce, which is already a new word I've learned today. And maybe you just spend the first 20 seconds on briefly reflecting the question you had posed, and then I will add those 20 seconds to you at the end of your talk.
That is very kind of you, Jochen. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, so I'm Susanne Scheibe from the Faculty of Behavioral and Social Sciences and working in the group Organizational Psychology. And in my work, I take a lifespan perspective on working. And I just noticed with the discussion, why do people not conform to the measures? Sometimes we just forget what humans need, and we should not forget that. Like social connectedness, I will also refer to that in my talk, is so important to people that you need to somehow fulfill this need to get them conform to the measures. But today, I would like to talk about work challenges in times of COVID-19. And I hope that you can see my slides all right. So it is very clear that nearly overnight, the pandemic has profoundly changed the workplace in many ways. For example, where we work, so mainly remotely. Also how we work, for example, providing services online or behind masks. It has changed the social context of work. So a colleague of mine recently said it very nicely. It feels like everyone is sitting on their own little island and working really hard and having no support. That's how it feels. I think that's a very nice description. Furthermore, the boundaries with non-work life are blurred, right? Because we're working and living all of a sudden in the same space. And that makes it very hard to get our recovery. And then also our outlook for the future has changed. So job insecurity has increased, and many people are facing a very unclear career outlook because industries are changing. Some disappear, some new industries appear, and it is very unclear for people how the economy will develop. It is also very clear that these workplace changes have a profound impact on our health, both our mental and our physical health. Just give you a few examples. We already see in the data that is appearing that people increasingly worry about financial health issues, and of course that takes a toll on their health. There is increased social isolation and loneliness that is also very strongly linked to people's health. We also see in our early data that people face somewhat lower psychosocial job demands. However, they also face lower job resources. And so overall, that is not a very stimulating mix for workers. We see that people show increased sedentary behavior during all these hours that they spend at work. And while interestingly, there's some recent data from TNO showing that so far, and the data is from June, there's no clear impact on the health and work-life balance of people, but we can expect that these effects will emerge in the future. And also, as the speaker already alluded to, many people see benefits of remote working, such as more time available for household members or for leisure activities. And so this is something I think to take into account as we shape a new normal way of working in the future. Now, the workplace changes affect nearly everyone, but it is also clear that there is differential impact for different social groups. And here you see a few examples, like the country you live in, the sector you work in, gender. All these factors have an impact. And but today I would like to focus on one such factor, and that is people's age or career stage. So from the work on aging at work that has been done in the last years, including some of my own work, we can make some predictions about differential challenges that people face as a function of how old they are and what stage they have in their career. So to give you a few examples, young adults or early career workers will mainly have challenges to manage the work non-work boundaries and digital overload. So we know that emotional self-regulation competencies tend to increase with age. So young people, their competencies are still under development, and so it is harder for them to, for example, manage their boundaries and focus to be able to work productively. Also, young people more often have insufficient home office resources, and that just means a distraction-free environment or a good desk, these kind of basic things. And then, of course, if you're a career starter or you're starting a new job in a company, then onboarding becomes very difficult if it all happens remotely. So you are deprived of learning opportunities, you are deprived of building social capital, so getting to know the people in the company, which would help you in your professional development. Now, middle-aged and mid-career workers face somewhat different challenges. So some of the most important ones probably are to juggle work and family in a shared space. Also, many middle-aged adults are in leadership roles, and all of a sudden they need to lead virtual teams, which requires a bit different leadership behaviors. So that is a challenge. And also, they may face threats to building their financial capital, because midlife is the period where you also want to financially prepare for the future, and this unsecure outlook on the future then becomes a problem. And older workers or late career workers, again, face somewhat different challenges. So we know from the cognitive aging research that learning new skills, which is very important when you change your work methods, is more difficult for older people. They may also not have the self-efficacy to be really engaged in learning new skills. We also know that older adults tend to have strong needs for inclusion and belongingness, and so that is difficult to fulfill in the remote work setting. And of course, they are facing increased health risk, and once they get ill, they also have prolonged rehabilitation time. So these are some predictions, and luckily some early data is emerging from the last months where the pandemic was already ongoing and the lockdown measures were in place. And so we have some early data to look at differential impact on younger and older workers. And one of the striking findings, I think, is that actually the young people suffer more than the older people. And this is partly consistent and partly a bit different than the prior speaker said. So there have actually been several studies now showing that older people tend to perceive higher health risk from COVID, but nevertheless, they worry less, they have more positive affect in daily life, they feel better able to cope, and they also show lower stress reactivity during lockdown periods. And we see a similar pattern in the TNO data that I already mentioned before, namely that older Dutch employees feel more productive, have more energy, and can better concentrate on their work tasks compared to young employees. So apparently, at least in this early phase, the young people need more support. They are having more trouble. But of course, it is clear that in the long term also other age groups will need some support. So a question, of course, for practice is what can organizations do? And I think it's important to address three key domains, the social domain, productivity, and health. And a few of the measures that organizations should consider is, first of all, to really do an effort to provide opportunities for social connections. And I think different age groups will all benefit from these, but for different reasons. So young people will benefit because it provides them learning opportunities and a chance to build human capital. Older employees will benefit because they can satisfy their belongingness needs and their inclusion needs. And also, given what we know about these different challenges and different strengths of different age groups, I think we should really try to foster an intergenerational knowledge exchange. So let older workers, older co-workers help young people manage better mental stress. Let young workers help their older co-workers better manage this transition to new digital tools and the need to learn new ways of working. In terms of productivity, organizations should really invest in providing tools and quick support for remote work and also eventually for hybrid work, where we will alternate, that is the prediction for the future, right? We will alternate between home office and location work. And again, I think young and older workers can benefit from different types of support. So young people mainly need physical equipment like distraction-free environment, whereas older workers probably need more support, learning to navigate, for example, digital tools for virtual teamwork. And it's important to invest in human capital and professional development, and that may be particularly important for mid-career workers. As I said before, they may find themselves in new leadership or face new leadership demands with virtual teams that they have to manage. And also the uncertain career outlook means that they have to invest in their capital, in their human capital, to remain employable for the future. And organizations, of course, can also directly support the health of their employees, for example, educating them or providing coaching about work-life balance and mental health, and get employees to move. So, for example, introduce walking meetings where people move while having their meetings. Yeah, so as the good old saying goes, never let a crisis go to waste. I think this is an extremely interesting time to reflect on workplace changes, and we should definitely have an eye on the differential impacts that we see for different social groups, and ideally tailor our support to these differential needs that, for example, age groups face in the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanne, for a very interesting talk. I think, of course, we've seen that all our workplaces have been kind of changed quite dramatically through the COVID crisis, and we also see that this has also been kind of differential, of course, across different groups. So just one thing I wanted to ask you before we head out to the break until exactly 3:30 is, we see that also in the barometer, I thought one thing that we saw, which was really interesting, that I would like you to reflect on, is we often see kind of discussion that people with somewhat lower education find it harder to adhere to all kinds of corona rules. But then when we ask them whether actually their job lends itself to work within the rules, many of them said, no, it's okay. But in the end, my job is not in an office where I can sit away from people or go home, but I have a job where I am physically close to people. So maybe you can reflect a bit on, also the capability that in a surrounding provides people and their work surrounding to actually adhere to rules, and how this differs across different groups.
Yeah, so I think I was mainly talking about different age groups, and you're referring mainly to differences between educational groups, right? Who of course find themselves in different occupational sectors. And of course, it is very true also if you look at the numbers, how many people are working from home or still on location, then education plays a major role. And low educated people are more often in jobs where they cannot work from home. And then, of course, it is more difficult to keep a distance. You also have new challenges like supermarket personnel who has to deal with angry customers because they ask them to put on their masks. So this also creates new emotional demands. And to the extent that people get exhausted from their work, it will also be harder to keep up the measures, right? So if we are rested, if we are well equipped, and recovered and have energy, then it is so much easier to conform with the measures.
Yeah, because I think this also ties into what Henk was saying earlier, that this kind of social divide seems to be widening, and I think that indeed the workplace is also one of those places where that could potentially happen. And maybe that's something that we can get back to also during the panel discussion. So thanks a lot, Susanne.